What's up, guys? Welcome to a new day. I'm Stephanie Ryder, and this is the 365 Shares podcast. It is January 9th, 2024, and this is the 9th episode of the 365 Shares podcast. Today's topic is mistakes. And before I started reading this passage in the Strengthening My Recovery Daily Affirmations book, I assumed that it was about making mistakes and what we do when we make mistakes, like as if we're having a relapse or we do something bad. And I think in maybe some substance recovery programs that would be the case, but the context is actually really interesting for this passage because it's really talking about more about how people raised in alcoholic or dysfunctional homes develop perfectionism as a way to try to get love, because a lot of families withhold love from their children unless they do what they're supposed to do or do things that are pleasing to the adults who are supposed to be taking care of them. And in the Big Red Book, because this perfectionism topic has come up in book study meetings before, it says that sometimes parents can really think that they're doing a good thing. They want their children to be the best they can be. So they're always moving the bar of what it means to succeed. But what this really does to kids is teach them that they're never good enough, that nothing they do will ever make them be a good enough person or earn them the love that they deserve. And that's love that should really be given freely to all children without them having to do anything. And I definitely identify very strongly with this perfectionism. And the passage today really talks about making mistakes and how it's important to make mistakes and it's good to make mistakes. And we should separate ourselves from the mistakes that we made and believing that that's just something we did versus thinking that we are mistakes. The affirmation for today is, on this day, I will give myself the freedom to make an error and know that it does not affect my worth as a human being. I'm Steph, and this is my share. As I mentioned, I've struggled with perfectionism. I have a great book called The Perfectionism Handbook. That's a cognitive behavioral therapy workbook that you go through, and there are quizzes, and there are activities, and there are writing prompts. And that's something that I've done a lot. I probably should go back to it. I sort of do it sporadically. But one of the interesting things that it taught me was that there are different types of perfectionism. There is self-focused perfectionism, so I have to be perfect. There is other-focused or partner-focused perfectionism, which I have definitely had in the past, where you expect your partner or those around you to live up to the highest possible standards, and you punish them in various ways if they do not meet those standards. There is school perfectionism, where you're focused on getting good grades. There's social perfectionism, where you have to be seen a certain way. You have to be at events. You have to look nice or look fancy. You have to have a lot of friends. There are so many different ways that we adapt perfectionism to try to have an illusion of control in our lives. And it's so important to allow ourselves to make mistakes because they're natural, they are unavoidable, and it really teaches us to have grace for ourselves, and it teaches us that no mistake is the end of the road. And we really just see everything as a learning opportunity. And I've talked about triggers as opportunities to heal old wounds, but I also think mistakes are opportunities to give ourselves grace and to reparent ourselves in a loving way. And maybe growing up, we never heard, that's okay, you made a mistake, get up and try it again, in a loving tone that made it clear that we weren't in trouble or that love would not be withheld from us. But as adults, we can tell ourselves, that's okay, you just made a mistake. And it's hard to do for sure. And it depends on, the severity of the mistake. And, if it's a little mistake at work, you can just say, oh, sorry, I sent you the wrong file. Here's the updated file, or I didn't type those numbers in correctly. Or if it's an interaction with a person, you can say, hey, I lost my cool there, or I said some things I didn't really mean, but let me apologize. And that was a mistake, and we can roll from that. Of course, there are mistakes that can hurt people emotionally or physically, and we really have to try to take accountability for those and try to learn and change. But again, there's no real point in just beating ourselves senseless over mistakes, even big mistakes, because what's in the past is in the past and we can't change it. So I really like this topic. Sort of unrelated, I went to see The Color Purple today. I thought it was really good. I haven't read the book. This is the new musical version. I had tried to watch the old Steven Spielberg version, but I didn't like it very much. It's just very sort of drawn out and joyless. And I thought this musical version was really wonderful. And it tells a lot of sad stories, but tying all the characters together, and there's so much redemption. And the part that I thought was the saddest is there's a really tough female character in it who's standing up to all these abusive men in her life, and she's sort of a role model for some of the other women who are downtrodden. And then she gets into a situation. She's Black. It's post-slavery, but she's Black in the South, and gets into a situation with some white people and ends up going to jail just for being that same strong person that she was in her community. She's now beaten and jailed for years without being able to see her family, for just being who she is. And it was really sad because I really sort of identified with that. People have different adaptations when you come out of an alcoholic or an abusive home. Some people become very meek and very timid and terrified. And some people try to sort of mimic their abusers or the stronger people in their family and get really tough or really angry or really scary so that nobody will mess with them. And I think I have been more of the latter. And I've really tried to work on smoothing those edges down, but it was really just something that I did to protect myself. And in the movie, she says, I had to fight my father, I had to fight my brothers, I had to fight my cousins, I had to fight my uncles, like all these people. And it was so awful to see her look like she was in a situation that she was never going to get out of. Not having read the book, I didn't know if she was going to be in jail forever. I didn't know if she was ever going to see her family again. And then she does get out of jail. Apologies, spoilers, but she does get out of jail, and she's like this broken woman. And it's made me so sad. And I had this sort of thought of like, because she made this mistake, because she stood up for herself to the wrong people, did that ruin her whole life? Is this an insurmountable mistake? Is this a mistake that breaks her spirit? And then some of the other women finally get up and stand up for themselves and say they're not going to take their abuse anymore, and really turn the tables on these men. And the woman who had been in jail starts laughing and just has this really great, hearty belly laugh, like the old laugh that she used to have when she was really sure of herself and she felt in control of her circumstances. And then she sort of snapped back to herself, and these other women got to exit and do their own thing. And she was like, I'll take it from here. I've got all these men to straighten out. I'm right back. I'm back. I'm right back to where I belong. And she has a renewed sense of purpose. And it was so powerful to me to think about the mistakes that we make and how it seems like we have ruined our lives, or we have put ourselves in such horrible situations. I had a situation a few years ago where I got fired over a non-compete issue and got sued, and it was awful, and I was out of work, and I had to get a lawyer, and just thought that I had messed things up so badly for myself because I had the audacity to try to leave a job where they refused to pay me more, to go to a job where they were going to pay me more, and then there was this retaliation. And when I was in it for months, and took a year for my non-compete to expire, but really just this feeling that I had messed things up, and now I'm out of work, and now I have this gap in my resume, and now I have this legal situation that I have to deal with. And then got it all resolved, back to work, found a better situation. And then a few years later, my sister got in a situation where she had to be really tough with people getting things done. And she mentioned me going through that legal trouble, that non-compete issue, that whole situation as inspiration for her to really fight for herself and really stand up for herself, and not just take what people, and especially men, were handing down to her and trying to get away with things to make things better for themselves and worse for her. And I had that same moment that they have in the movie where you're so beaten down because you think you've made such a big mistake that you've destroyed your life. And then you realize that just you surviving it was inspiration for someone else to survive a mistake that was coming to them down the road. And it sort of makes everything okay. It gives these past negative events a sense of purpose, and it sort of weaves them into the narrative of your whole life, because now it's just not an isolated incident. It's tied into the way you handle things in the future, the way people who look up to you or look at you handle things in the future. And that's really powerful. So my advice to myself or to anyone listening would be, when you're in something that feels like the worst mistake, an insurmountable problem, any kind of horrible situation, it's so hard to do this, but if you could just build in a little tiny voice in the back of your mind that says, you never know what is going to come out of this situation. And check in with yourself in a month, in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year, and say, hey, think about that situation. Did anything come out of it? Did I have any conversations because of it? Did it change my mind about something that I had planned, and the thing that I did instead was so wonderful? Do I find myself in such an amazing, better situation now than I was in before? You never know. And that is really where faith comes in, because we can't know how negative events in the present are going to influence and change our life in the future, but we can have faith that either something good will come of it or that we will learn from it, and that we have the fortitude to keep going. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks.